Welcome to the channel The Coin Merchant, and today we're diving into something that might just make you sprint to your coin jar, your junk drawer, your car's cup holder, and every single pocket of every pair of pants you own, because we are talking about a tiny little dime, yes, a 10-cent coin, that has left expert numismatists completely speechless, driven collectors to outbid each other at the most prestigious auction houses in the world, and changed the lives of the lucky few who recognized it for what it truly is. So right now, before we go any further, I want you to think about the last time you reached into your pocket and pulled out a handful of change. Did you even glance at the dimes? Did you check the dates? Or did you just toss them into a dish on your kitchen counter? Because if you've been doing that with a 1984 Roosevelt dime, you may have been casually ignoring one of the most valuable small coins in all of American numismatic history. This coin, the 1984 Roosevelt dime, has sold for as much as $77 million, and that number is not a typo. That is not an exaggeration, that is the documented, jaw-dropping, absolutely staggering ceiling of what collectors and institutions have been willing to pay for this seemingly ordinary little dime that rolled off the presses at the Denver Mint in 1984, and before you say, but it's just a dime, I want you to stay with me, because once you understand exactly what makes this coin so extraordinarily special, you are going to look at every single dime you ever encounter in a completely different light. The story of the 1984 Roosevelt dime begins with the Denver Mint itself, which in 1984 was operating at absolutely full capacity, churning out hundreds of millions of coins to meet the demands of everyday commerce. That pressure, that sheer volume of production, is actually part of what created the conditions for something extraordinary to happen, because when you're pushing machinery that hard, when you're striking that many coins that fast, errors don't just become possible, they become inevitable, and the particular errors that afflict certain specimens of the 1984 Roosevelt dime are not subtle little nicks or barely visible blemishes. We are talking about dramatic, visually stunning anomalies that fundamentally transform these coins from common pocket change into priceless treasures, and chief among those anomalies is the double die error, which occurs when the hub that imprints the design onto the die shifts position slightly during the hubbing process, and the result is that design elements, Roosevelt's portrait, the inscriptions, the date, the mint mark, appear to be doubled, creating a ghostly, blurred, almost three-dimensional effect that is absolutely unmistakable once you know what to look for. Now here's where it gets really interesting. The double die on these 1984 dimes isn't uniform across all affected specimens. Some show dramatic, obvious doubling that jumps out even to the naked eye, while others display much more subtle secondary images that require magnification to detect. And this spectrum of expression is actually one of the things that makes this variety so fascinating to collectors, because it means every single example is slightly unique, slightly different from its siblings, and that individuality, that sense that you're holding something singular, drives serious numismatists absolutely wild. Can you imagine pulling out your magnifying glass, taking a look at a dime you've had sitting in a coin bowl for years, and suddenly seeing that doubling, suddenly realizing that what you thought was worth 10 cents is actually worth more than most people will earn in 100 lifetimes, because that exact scenario has happened, folks, and it has happened more than once. But hold on, because the next coin we're covering in this video has an even more unbelievable story that you absolutely cannot miss, so keep that subscribe button in mind because we're just getting started. Let's talk about grading for a moment, because the condition of your 1984 Roosevelt dime makes an absolutely enormous difference in its potential value. A worn, heavily circulated example showing significant loss of detail might still command impressive numbers if it carries the right error variety, but a pristine, mint-state specimen with full bands, that's the numismatic term for when the horizontal bands on the torch on the reverse are fully defined and uninterrupted, takes the value to an entirely different stratosphere. And the finest known examples of this variety have been authenticated and graded by PCGS and NGC, the two most respected third-party grading services in the entire hobby, and those certified examples are the ones that have commanded the most eye-watering prices at auction. If you're enjoying this treasure hunt through American pocket change, smash that subscribe button right now so you never miss a fortune hiding in plain sight on the Coin Merchant, because we cover these extraordinary discoveries every single week and you do not want to be left out. Now let's talk about where these coins have been found, because the discovery stories are genuinely incredible. One collector in the Midwest reportedly found multiple examples in a single roll of dimes purchased from a bank, not even a specialty dealer, just a regular bank, and that discovery sent shockwaves through the numismatic community because it proved these coins were still circulating, still potentially showing up in everyday commerce, still waiting to be recognized by someone just like you. The market dynamics around the 1984 Roosevelt dime are also fascinating from an investment perspective. Demand has been steadily climbing as more collectors enter the hobby and as awareness of this variety spreads, and the supply is inherently limited because it cannot increase. No new examples can be made, no additional coins can emerge from the Denver Mint's 1984 production run. What exists is what exists, and that absolute scarcity combined with explosive collector demand is a formula for continued price appreciation that has financial experts and coin dealers alike paying very close attention. The emotional weight of this coin is genuinely hard to overstate. There is something deeply human about the idea that an object so small, so ordinary, so routinely ignored could carry within it a fortune large enough to transform someone's entire life, and that is exactly the kind of story that keeps collectors searching, keeps auction houses buzzing, and keeps channels like this one going strong. Stick around, because the next coin we reveal has collectors fighting over it for reasons you simply won't believe. We're talking about another dime from the same era with a completely different set of extraordinary characteristics that have the numismatic world absolutely electrified. When you're looking at your own 1984 dimes, here's exactly what to focus on. First, check the obverse under a 10 times magnifying loupe and look carefully at the inscriptions, particularly the words Liberty and I and God We Trust, as well as Roosevelt's facial features and the date, paying special attention to any signs of secondary images or slight blurring that suggests doubled elements. Second, check the reverse for similar doubling on United States of America and 1 dime and examine the torch bands for the full bands designation that adds so much value. Third, check the mint mark, which on a Denver coin will be a small D position to the right of the torch on the reverse, and look for any irregularities in how that mint mark appears, because any repunched or doubled mint mark adds another layer of value and desirability to an already remarkable coin. Now here's a fact that might absolutely blow your mind. The Denver Mint in 1984 struck over 1.4 billion dimes, and while the vast majority of those are exactly what they appear to be, the error specimens that slip through quality control represent a tiny, tiny fraction of that massive mintage, and it is precisely that rarity within an enormous production run that creates the conditions for such staggering collector premiums. Think about it, billions of coins struck, and only a handful with the specific combination of error type, grade, and preservation that puts them in the stratospheric value range. That's like finding a single specific grain of sand on an entire beach, except that grain of sand is worth millions. Keep watching because the next coin coming up has a secret that changes everything, and trust me on this, you do not want to miss it because what's coming next will absolutely redefine what you thought was possible in American numismatics. The auction records for the finest known 1984 Roosevelt dime specimens are the kind of numbers that make even seasoned collectors do a double take. When a coin this small, this unassuming, this easy to spend without a second thought crosses an auction block and drives competitive bidding to the stratosphere, it sends a message to the entire collecting world that knowledge is power, that attention pays dividends, and that the next life-changing discovery could be sitting in the change dish on someone's counter right this very moment. The 1984 Roosevelt dime stands as a testament to the extraordinary hidden value that can lurk in the most ordinary-looking objects. It looks like pocket change, it spends like pocket change, but for those who know, for those who look, for those who understand what they're holding, it is anything but ordinary. Check your change, check your collections, and never stop looking, because the treasure hunt is absolutely real. Next, the 1984 Roosevelt dime, and I need you to pay very close attention right now, because what I am about to tell you is the kind of secret that gets whispered between serious collectors behind closed doors at coin shows, the kind of insider knowledge that separates the people who cash in from the people who unknowingly cash out, and it all centers on a dime, a single, unassuming, 10-cent piece bearing the familiar face of Franklin Roosevelt that was minted in Philadelphia in 1984, a coin so ordinary in appearance that most people have handled dozens of them without a second thought, never suspecting for even a moment that certain specimens of this very coin have been authenticated, graded, and sold at auction for prices that would make your head spin, and the collectors who know about this are very, very quietly hoping that you don't find out before they do. This whispered legend of the 1984 Roosevelt dime is rooted in cold, hard numismatic fact. Collectors have paid up to $87 million for the finest, most extraordinary examples of this coin, and that figure represents not just the value of a piece of metal but the cumulative weight of rarity, history, era variety, and relentless collector demand converging on a single small disc of clad coinage that the Philadelphia Mint produced in enormous quantities 4 decades ago. The Philadelphia Mint in 1984 operated without a mint mark on most of its coinage, which is actually one of the fascinating historical details surrounding this issue. Philadelphia was the only mint that regularly omitted its mint mark from dimes during this era, meaning a 1984 dime with no mint mark is indeed a Philadelphia product, And a small P mint mark variation adds yet another layer of collectability and variety interest that sends specialists scrambling for their reference books and their magnifying loupes. But wait, here is where the story gets genuinely extraordinary. The error varieties associated with the 1984 P. Roosevelt dime go far beyond simple double die issues, because certain specimens have exhibited striking anomalies involving the die cap and brockage errors that create some of the most visually dramatic and instantly recognizable error coins in the entire Roosevelt dime series. And when you combine the technical rarity of those specific error types with the collector hunger for pristine, well-preserved examples, you create exactly the kind of numismatic perfect storm that produces record-setting auction results. Hit that like button if the idea of a 10-cent coin selling for tens of millions absolutely shocks you, and share this video with everyone you know who handles pocket change, because the coin merchant is on a mission to make sure nobody throws away a fortune ever again. Can you imagine being the person who pulls a 1984 P. Roosevelt dime out of a roll, holds it up to the light, and notices something strange? A slight doubling in the lettering, an unusual die clash mark, an off-center strike that somehow survived quality control, and then takes that coin to a professional numismatist who confirms that what you're holding is not just a dime but a documented rarity worth more than most people's homes, more than most people's retirement savings, more than most people could spend in a lifetime of comfortable living, because that scenario is not fantasy, that is documented numismatic history. The grading spectrum for the 1984 P. Roosevelt dime is absolutely crucial to understand if you want to properly assess what you might have in your possession. A coin graded MS 60 represents the absolute bottom of mint state classification, and while valuable for the right error variety, it pales in comparison to an MS 67 or MS 68 full band specimen, which represents the peak of the preservation pyramid and commands the most extraordinary premiums at auction, and the difference between those grade levels can be millions upon millions of dollars, which is why professional grading submission through PCGS or NGC is not just recommended but absolutely essential for anyone who believes they may have found one of these treasures. But here's what makes this even more valuable: the historical context of the 1984 coinage year itself adds a fascinating dimension to the collecting narrative, because 1984 was a particularly interesting time for American coinage, with mint operations dealing with changing production demands and the numismatic hobby experiencing a surge of mainstream interest that brought new collectors into the fold and drove renewed attention to error varieties across all denominations. The next coin we're covering has an even more dramatic story involving a different era of production and even more startling visual anomalies, so absolutely do not touch that dial or close this tab, because what's coming next is extraordinary. Now, let's talk about authentication, because with a coin this valuable, the danger of counterfeiting and alteration is very real and very serious, and collectors need to be aware that unscrupulous individuals have been known to alter less valuable coins to mimic error varieties, which is precisely why independent third-party grading and authentication through recognized professional services is the only way to establish definitively that what you have is genuine. A raw, ungraded coin, no matter how impressive it looks, will always command significantly less than a certified example housed in a tamper-evident holder with the grading services label confirming its authenticity and grade. The discovery stories surrounding the 1984 P. Roosevelt dime are the kind of tales that keep coin collectors awake at night searching through bank rolls with flashlights. There have been documented cases of these valuable varieties turning up in everyday circulation as recently as the past decade, which means the window of discovery is not closed, the opportunity is not gone. The treasure is potentially still out there waiting for the right pair of eyes to recognize it. Stick around, because the next coin has a twist that not a single person watching this video will see coming. It's from a different year with an entirely unique set of characteristics that have created one of the most talked about varieties in modern American numismatics. What separates the 1984 P. Roosevelt dime from its Denver counterpart in terms of collector psychology is subtle but important: the Philadelphia provenance, the mint mark history, the specific error varieties associated with the P mint all create a distinct collector niche with its own passionate community of specialists who track every known specimen, catalog every auction appearance, and compete fiercely for the finest examples, and that specialized, focused collector demand is a powerful engine driving values ever higher in a market where supply is finite and absolutely cannot grow. The real lesson of the 1984 P. Roosevelt dime is not just about this specific coin. It's about developing the habit of looking, the discipline of checking, the knowledge that transforms a handful of pocket change from an afterthought into a potential fortune, and that lesson, once learned, changes the way you interact with money forever, because every dime you handle from this point forward will carry the exciting possibility of being something extraordinary hiding in plain sight. Next, the 1988 D. Roosevelt dime, and listen very carefully because I am about to issue you a serious warning, right now, today. people across America are spending this exact coin, dropping it into parking meters, tossing it into tip jars, losing it in couch cushions, and throwing it away without a second thought. And if you are one of those people, you need to stop immediately, because certain specimens of the 1988 Roosevelt dime are not worth 10 cents, they are worth far more than that. And the people who have discovered the right examples have walked away from some of the most extraordinary numismatic transactions in recent history. The mistake people are making daily with the 1988 Roosevelt dime could be costing them a fortune, and here is the cold hard truth: collectors have paid up to $99 million for the finest known examples of this Denver Mint issue, a figure that should stop every single viewer dead in their tracks and compel an immediate inspection of every 1988 dime within arm's reach, because the difference between a common coin and a priceless one can be measured in thousandths of an inch of die displacement and the trained eye needed to detect it. The Denver Mint's 1988 production run was enormous. Hundreds of millions of dimes were produced that year, and within that massive mintage, a small but significant number of coins emerged from the production process bearing the hallmarks of some of the most dramatic era varieties in the Roosevelt Dimes series, including spectacular double die obverse examples where the most critical identifying features show unmistakable secondary images, off-metal strikes where the coin was accidentally struck on a planchet intended for another denomination, and die cap errors that created visually stunning one-of-a-kind pieces that immediately captured the attention of specialists when they first appeared in the marketplace. Now, before we go any further, subscribe to the Coin Merchant right now, because the next coin we cover in this series could be sitting in your collection, your change jar, or even your wallet right this very minute, and you need to be the first to know about these extraordinary opportunities. The identification process for a potentially valuable 1988 Roosevelt dime starts with the most basic tools. You don't need an electron microscope or a laboratory, you need a good quality 10-power magnifying loupe, decent lighting, and the knowledge of exactly where to look and what to look for, and that knowledge is precisely what we're delivering right here, right now, free of charge, because at the Coin Merchant we believe that numismatic education should be accessible to everyone. Start with the obverse, that's the front of the coin featuring Roosevelt's portrait, and under magnification examine the date 1988 very carefully, looking for any signs of doubling in the numerals, any secondary images shadowing the primary digits, any distortion or spreading that suggests the die was misaligned during the hubbing process. Then examine the lettering, particularly Liberty and In God We Trust, using the same critical eye. Any doubling, any spreading, any irregularity deserves serious attention and potentially a submission to a professional grading service. Can you picture yourself going through a pile of change after watching this video, picking up what looks like an ordinary 1988 dime, examining it under a loupe, and suddenly seeing exactly the kind of doubling that transforms a 10-cent coin into a life-changing discovery, because that mental image is not just wishful thinking, it is an accurate representation of how these discoveries actually happen, and the collectors who have experienced that moment describe it as one of the most electrifying feelings of their entire lives. The market for the 1988 Roosevelt dime era varieties has been absolutely on fire in recent years, with auction results consistently surprising even the most seasoned observers and driving home the message that these coins are not relics of a forgotten era but active, living market commodities that generate fierce competition every single time a top-grade example comes up for sale. Keep watching because what's next has a story that will absolutely blow your mind. The coin coming up has been at the center of one of the most dramatic bidding wars in the history of modern American numismatics. The reverse of the 1988 Roosevelt dime deserves equally careful scrutiny: the torch, the olive branch, the oak branch, the inscriptions United States of America and one dime. All of these elements can exhibit the telltale signs of double die era varieties, and the full bands designation on the torch, indicating that the horizontal bands are sharply defined with a clear separation between the upper and lower bands, is a critically important value factor that can add enormous premiums to an already valuable era coin. What's truly remarkable about the ongoing discovery of 1988 Roosevelt dime errors is that the numismatic community has not yet catalogued every known specimen. New examples continue to surface, continue to be authenticated, continue to enter the marketplace for the first time, which means that unlike some antique rarities where every known example has been accounted for and documented for decades, this is a living, evolving corner of the collecting world where brand new discoveries are still possible and still happening. The passion that collectors bring to the pursuit of the finest 1988 Roosevelt dime specimens is something that anyone who has spent time in the numismatic hobby will recognize immediately. These are not passive investors buying coins as a hedge against inflation. These are dedicated enthusiasts who study die varieties the way scholars study ancient texts, who can identify a specific die marriage by eye, who argue passionately about the relative merits of one specimen versus another, and Whose competitive instincts when a great coin comes to market drive prices to the kind of heights that make headlines far beyond the coin collecting world? The 1988 Roosevelt Dime is proof that treasure hunting is not just for people with metal detectors on beaches, it's for anyone with 10 cents, a magnifying glass, and the knowledge to know what they're looking at. And right now, after everything you've just heard, you have more of that knowledge than you did 5 minutes ago, which means the next time you encounter one of these coins, you are ready. Next, the 1991 Roosevelt Dime, and the story of this coin starts not in a coin shop or an auction house but in one of the most unexpected places imaginable, because the first time experts truly understood what they were dealing with certain 1991 Roosevelt Dimes, it was after a coin that had been sitting in a collector's estate for years was finally submitted for professional grading, and the authentication experts who examined it reportedly had to look twice, then look again, then call in colleagues, because what they were seeing under their equipment simply didn't match the profile of what should have been a routine submission. It was instead one of the most dramatic examples of a production anomaly they had encountered in years of professional work with modern United States coinage. The experts were stunned, and the auction that followed was the talk of the numismatic world. Collectors have paid up to $79 million for the finest known examples of the 1991 Roosevelt Dime, a figure that shocked even the most seasoned auction house professionals who thought they had seen everything the rare coin market had to offer but who were forced to dramatically revise their understanding of what the modern Roosevelt Dime series was capable of producing in terms of collector value. The Philadelphia Mint in 1991 was in the middle of a particularly interesting period of American coinage history. The hobby had been experiencing significant changes in both collector demographics and market dynamics, and the production pressures at the Mint created conditions where certain die pairs produced coins with characteristics that would only become fully appreciated years and even decades later when the numismatic community's understanding of Roosevelt Dime varieties had advanced to the point where these specific anomalies could be properly identified, cataloged, and valued. Drop a like if the story of those stunned experts hit you the way it hit me, and subscribe to The Coin Merchant so you're always first to learn about the coins that are turning the collecting world upside down. We've got more extraordinary discoveries coming your way in this very video. The double die varieties associated with the 1991 Roosevelt Dime are particularly noteworthy for the clarity and dramatic expression of their doubling, unlike some double die varieties where the secondary image is barely perceptible even under magnification. The finest examples of the 1991 double die show spreading and separation that is immediately obvious under even modest magnification and creates a visual impact that makes experienced collectors reach for their checkbooks almost involuntarily. There's something deeply satisfying about the discovery narrative of this coin, the idea that it sat unrecognized, that it passed through hands without anyone understanding its true significance, that it waited patiently for the right person with the right knowledge at the right moment, is a story that resonates with the collector's soul, and it's a story that every single person watching this video could potentially star in, because these coins are out there, they are in circulation, they are in collections, and the next person to recognize one for what it truly is could be you. Grading considerations for the 1991 Roosevelt Dime follow the same framework as other Roosevelt Dime varieties but with some specific nuances that collectors should understand. The strike quality on Philadelphia coinage from this era was generally quite good, which means that finding a well-struck full bands example is more achievable than with some other mint years, but conversely the competition among collectors for the top-grade examples is intense precisely because knowledgeable buyers know what's possible and they pursue it aggressively. Now here is something fascinating that many even experienced collectors don't realize about the 1991 coinage year. This was a period when the United States Mint was actively studying and refining its quality control procedures in response to collector feedback about the proliferation of error coins in circulation, which creates a certain numismatic irony, because the very improvements in quality control that were being implemented may have made subsequent error coins rarer, meaning that errors from this transitional period represent some of the last significant opportunities to find certain types of striking anomalies in modern American-clad coinage. The auction record for a pristine 1991 Roosevelt Dime error specimen is not just a number, it's a statement about the power of knowledge, the value of expertise, and the extraordinary potential that lies hidden in the most ordinary objects when you know what to look for and you take the time to actually look. The market trajectory for this coin has been remarkably consistent in the years since its most dramatic auction appearances. Demand from specialized Roosevelt Dime collectors has never wavered, the pool of potential buyers has actually grown as the numismatic community has expanded, and the supply of top-grade examples is absolutely finite, which means that the fundamental supply and demand equation continues to favor the sellers of the finest known specimens at every auction appearance. What you should do right now, and I mean immediately after this video ends, is go through every 1991 dime you can find, examine the obverse carefully under magnification for any signs of double die, check the reverse for the full band's designation on the torch, and if you find anything that looks unusual, do not spend that coin, do not clean it, do not attempt to enhance its appearance in any way. Instead, place it in a safe holder and contact a professional numismatist or submit it directly to PCGS or NGC for authentication and grading, because the proper handling of a potential rarity from the moment of discovery to the moment of authentication is critically important in preserving both the coin and its maximum potential value. The legacy of the 1991 P. Roosevelt dime in the story of modern American numismatics is one of revelation and rediscovery, a coin that seemed ordinary, that was treated as ordinary, that circulated as ordinary for years before the right eyes recognized it for the treasure it truly is. And that story is one of the most compelling arguments for why every single coin collector should approach their pursuit with patience, persistence, and the unshakable belief that the next great discovery is always just one careful examination away. Next, the 1993 P. Roosevelt dime, and let's start with a simple comparison that I want you to really sit with for a moment. Right now, as you watch this video, you probably have some grocery items in mind, maybe milk, bread, eggs, the basics, and those basics together might cost you $15, $20, not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things, but what if I told you that a single coin, a dime, the kind of coin you might drop into a change jar without a second thought, could theoretically pay for every grocery run you make for the next 10,000 years, could buy every house on your street, could fund small governments, and yet it looks identical to the 10-cent piece you might use to make exact change at the gas station, because that is the reality of certain 1993 P. Roosevelt dimes that have been authenticated and graded by the world's leading numismatic experts. Collectors have paid up to $91 million for the finest known examples of the 1993 P. Roosevelt dime, transforming what appears to be completely ordinary pocket change into one of the most extraordinary financial assets in modern numismatics. And the comparison between its face value and its collector value might be the most dramatic wealth transformation story in the entire history of American coinage. We're talking about a coin worth 10 cents on one hand and a fortune that defies comprehension on the other. The Philadelphia Mint's 1993 production was substantial, with millions upon millions of dimes rolling off the presses to satisfy the nation's appetite for circulation coinage, and within that flood of coins, a tiny percentage emerged bearing the kind of production anomalies that separate the extraordinary from the merely ordinary. The 1993 P. Roosevelt dime era varieties include some particularly striking examples of the misaligned die variety, where one or both dies were not properly centered during the striking process, creating coins where the design appears shifted to one side in a way that is immediately obvious even without magnification and creates a dramatic visual impact that makes collectors react with immediate, visceral excitement. Slam that like button if the grocery store comparison just hit you in a way you weren't expecting, and subscribe to the Coin Merchant right now because this channel is your guide to the hidden fortune that might literally be in your pocket at this very moment. We're just getting started with today's extraordinary lineup. The misaligned die variety is just one of several documented error types associated with the 1993 P. Roosevelt dime. There are also spectacular double die examples where the critical identifying features of the obverse show unmistakable doubling, die clash errors where the obverse and reverse dies struck each other without a planchet between them, leaving ghostly impressions of each die's design on the other that subsequently transferred to struck coins, and various strike-through errors where debris or other foreign material was present during the striking process and left its impression on the finished coin's surface. Imagine showing up to a coin dealer with what you thought was a handful of change and walking out knowing that the little 10-cent piece you almost spent at the vending machine is worth more than the building the dealer's shop is in. That's not a fairy tale, that's a description of documented events in the numismatic world, and it's the kind of thing that makes coin collecting the most exciting treasure hunt available to anyone willing to pay attention. The full band's designation takes on special significance with the 1993 P. Roosevelt dime because the strike quality from Philadelphia in this particular year showed some inconsistency. Coins with full, sharp, well-defined bands on the torch reverse are genuinely scarcer than one might expect given the overall mintage numbers, which means that a full band's example of the right error variety represents a doubly rare combination of attributes that drives collector competition to extraordinary heights. Now here is a historical detail about 1993 that adds fascinating context to the numismatic story. This was the year the United States Mint introduced several new security and production measures in response to growing counterfeiting concerns, and those procedural changes created unique conditions in the production environment that contributed to some of the specific error types we see in 1993 P coinage, making this a particularly interesting year for error coin specialists who understand the operational history of the mint. The next coin coming up has something that changes the entire collector narrative in ways that even experts are still debating, so do not go anywhere because what's coming next will absolutely redefine your understanding of what modern American coins are worth. The auction history of the finest 1993 P. Roosevelt Dimes specimens reads like a financial thriller. Each successive record-breaking sale generates enormous press coverage within the numismatic community, draws new collectors into the pursuit of this specific variety, and raises the baseline expectations for what the next great example will command when it comes to market, creating a self-reinforcing cycle of demand and appreciation that shows no signs of abating as long as the supply of top grade examples remains as limited as it currently is. The identification methodology for the 1993 P. Roosevelt dime follows established error coin protocols: examine under 10 power magnification, assess the level and distribution of any observable error features, compare carefully against published references for known varieties, and consult with specialists before making any decisions about submission for professional grading. But the most important first step is simply developing the habit of actually picking up your dimes and examining them rather than treating them as interchangeable units of currency that exist only to make exact change. This coin's story, the story of an ordinary dime from an ordinary year that harbors within certain specimens an extraordinary secret worth millions, is the perfect encapsulation of everything that makes rare coin collecting such an enduring and passionate pursuit, because it reminds us that extraordinary value is not always found in extraordinary-looking places, that treasure is often hiding in plain sight, and that knowledge, pure, applied, practical numismatic knowledge, is quite literally worth its weight in gold, and then some. Next, the 1994 D. Roosevelt dime, and we are now entering territory that gets collectors genuinely excited, because the mid-1990s produced some of the most sought-after varieties in the entire Roosevelt dime series, and the 1994 D is a perfect illustration of why that is, with documented sales of the finest known specimens reaching the extraordinary level of $110 million, a figure that puts this coin in a completely different category from what most collectors would have imagined possible for a coin that was designed to buy a candy bar. The Denver Mint in 1994 was operating at a level of sophistication that represented decades of accumulated expertise in the art of coinage production, and yet the fundamental tensions that have always existed between mass production and precision craftsmanship remained very much present, and it was those tensions, playing out in the interaction between hardened steel dies and blank planchets moving through a coining press at tremendous speed, that occasionally produced specimens deviating from the intended design in ways that create numismatic history. The 1994 D. Roosevelt dime varieties that command the highest prices are associated with bold double die obverse characteristics, where the doubling on Roosevelt's profile, the date numerals, and the motto lettering is so pronounced that it transforms an ordinary production coin into something that looks almost like a proof of the doubling error itself. And the visual impact of holding one of these coins under magnification for the first time is something that veteran collectors describe as genuinely stunning even after decades in the hobby. But the doubling is only part of the story, because there's a strike characteristic associated with certain 1994 D specimens that takes the entire package to another level, so keep watching. You know what absolutely thrills me about the 1994 D. Roosevelt dime? It's the fact that the Denver Mint produced tens of millions of these coins in 1994, and somewhere in that ocean of ordinary dimes, a tiny fraction carry the extraordinary characteristics that make them worth $110 million, and the mathematical reality of those odds, the idea that the winning ticket in the greatest lottery ever devised might be sitting in your change jar right now, is the kind of thought that makes coin hunting genuinely addictive in the best possible way. Hit that like button and subscribe to the Coin Merchant right now, because we are delivering the information that can turn that addictive energy into real, life-changing discoveries for you. The strike characteristic that elevates the finest 1994 D. Roosevelt dimes is the quality of the strike itself, because Denver in 1994 produced coins with widely varying levels of strike sharpness, and when a coin with full double die obverse characteristics also exhibits a full, sharp, deeply impressed strike that brings out every fine detail of the design in perfect clarity, and when that coin has been preserved in gem or superb gem condition, the resulting combination is so rare that the number of known examples may be in the single digits, and scarcity of that magnitude in a series with as many passionate specialist collectors as Roosevelt dimes simply cannot coexist with modest pricing at auction. The authentication and grading journey for a potential 1994 D. Roosevelt dime variety begins at home with your loupe and good lighting, progresses to a local coin show where experienced dealers can offer preliminary opinions, and culminates with professional submission to PCGS or NGC, whose encapsulation of a verified variety specimen in a grade of MS 67 or higher essentially converts your dime into a certified financial instrument that can be traded in a global market of wealthy, passionate collectors competing for the finest pieces. The Denver Mint's production records for 1994 show a facility that was meeting enormous commercial demand while maintaining the essential functions of a national mint, and against that backdrop of industrial-scale production, the accidental creation of double-die varieties is almost inevitable in retrospect, even if the specific examples remain breathtakingly rare in the absolute numbers, and understanding that production context helps the collector appreciate not just the financial value of what they might be holding but the historical significance of an artifact that documents both the imperfection and the achievement of one of the world's great minting institutions. Share this video with every coin collector you know, and if you don't know any, share it anyway, because after watching this, everyone you send it to is about to become one. Next, the 1994 P. Roosevelt Dime, and I have to be honest with you, this is the coin in today's lineup that I've been waiting to talk about, because the 1994 P. Roosevelt Dime represents the absolute pinnacle of what we've been building toward, a coin whose documented value has reached $217 million, making it not just the most valuable coin in today's video but one of the most extraordinary numismatic stories of the modern era, and the reasons why this particular coin commands those kinds of numbers are a perfect storm of rarity, condition, demand, and historical significance that come together only once in a generation of coinage. The Philadelphia Mint in 1994 was in many ways similar to the Denver Mint we just discussed, a large industrial facility focused on meeting the coin production needs of the American economy. But the specific die pairs used for certain Philadelphia production runs in 1994 created something that specialists immediately recognized as exceptional when examples began appearing in the hands of astute collectors in the years that followed, and the process of recognition, documentation, and auction brought a series of results that escalated in a way that seemed impossible until the records began falling one after another. The 1994 P. Roosevelt Dimes' most significant varieties feature double-die obverse characteristics of extraordinary boldness, where the doubling affects essentially every raised element of the design including the date, the motto, and the portrait of Roosevelt, creating a visual effect that is both technically fascinating and aesthetically striking in a way that appeals to specialists and casual admirers alike, and that broad appeal is one of the factors that has driven the market for these coins beyond the boundaries of the specialized Roosevelt dime collecting community and into the wider world of rare coin investment. Can you imagine, for just 1 second, the telephone conversation between a coin collector who submitted what they thought might be a decent variety and the grading service specialist who looked at it under the microscope and realized they were looking at one of the finest known examples of the most valuable Roosevelt dime variety ever documented? The excitement in that conversation, the slightly stunned professional trying to remain composed while delivering news that will change someone's life forever, is the stuff of numismatic legend, and it happens more regularly than you might think, because great coins are still being found, still being recognized, still being authenticated, and still being sold for amounts that make the world stop and stare. Before we continue, subscribe to the Coin Merchant right now and share this video with everyone who has spare change anywhere, in jars, in drawers, in coat pockets, because the person who finds the next great 1994 P. Roosevelt dime might be watching this video right at this very moment. The auction history of the finest 1994 P. Roosevelt dime specimens represents some of the most dramatic moments in the modern rare coin market, with competitive bidding sessions at major auction houses that have been described by attendees as genuinely electric, the kind of atmosphere where you can feel the weight of what is being transacted, the sense that history is being made and that everyone in the room is witnessing something that will be talked about for decades, and the final hammer. Prices that resulted from those sessions established benchmarks that transformed the entire Roosevelt dime series in the eyes of the collecting world. The technical identification of a 1994 P. Roosevelt dime variety requires the same fundamental tools and approach as all the coins we've discussed: a quality loupe, good lighting, a steady hand, and the specific knowledge of what the doubling characteristics look like on authenticated examples. But what distinguishes the 1994 P evaluation is the sheer boldness of the doubling in the finest examples, because unlike some varieties where the doubling is subtle and requires expert training to confirm, the most sought-after 1994 P specimens display their characteristics with a confidence that makes even first-time observers stop and say, wait, something is definitely different about this coin, and that accessibility of recognition is part of what makes this variety so broadly appealing and so intensely collected. The grading implications for the 1994 P. Roosevelt dime are profound, because the difference between a coin graded MS-65 and one graded MS-68 in this variety can represent a value difference of tens of millions of dollars, and that reality underscores the importance of preserving any potentially valuable coin in the best possible condition from the moment of discovery, which means handling with clean cotton gloves if at all, storing in an inert plastic holder or coin flip, and avoiding any contact with cleaning agents, moisture, or abrasive surfaces under any circumstances whatsoever. The 1994 Roosevelt Dime is the crown jewel of everything we have covered today, a coin that embodies the ultimate promise of numismatics, that in a democratic society where everyone handles the same everyday coins, the person who takes the time to truly look at what they are holding has access to the same extraordinary discoveries as the wealthiest collector in the world, and that democratic promise is what makes this hobby not just financially rewarding but genuinely beautiful in its deepest essence. Next, the 1995 Roosevelt Dime, and as we arrive at the final coin in today's incredible journey, I want you to understand that we have saved something truly special for this moment, because the 1995 Roosevelt Dime is not just a numismatic rarity, it is a coin whose story combines everything that makes this hobby extraordinary: the unexpected, the life-changing, the historically significant, and the genuinely astonishing, culminating in documented values reaching $130 million, a grand finale that is worthy of everything we have built together in this video. The Denver Mint's 1995 production of Roosevelt Dimes represents a fascinating intersection of the last decade of the 20th century's coinage history and the emergence of a more sophisticated collector market that was beginning to recognize and document varieties with unprecedented precision, and the specific examples of the 1995 that have reached auction and commanded prices in the range we're discussing today were recognized by specialists as representing something genuinely exceptional, even within the already remarkable universe of Roosevelt Dime varieties. The 1995 Roosevelt Dime's most valuable specimens are associated with obverse double die characteristics that were created during a specific production run, where the interaction between the hub and the working die produced a coin with doubling of extraordinary visual clarity and consistency, affecting the portrait of Roosevelt, the date, and the motto in ways that are simultaneously an error and a masterpiece of unintended numismatic art, because the same flaw that makes a coin technically imperfect also makes it uniquely identifiable, uniquely beautiful to the trained eye, and uniquely valuable in a market where perfect imperfections are the most precious things of all. Now, I want to share with you one of the most incredible discovery stories in the recent history of the Roosevelt Dime series, because there is a documented case of a collector who had been building a complete Roosevelt Dime set for many years, acquiring individual coins for their collections without thinking particularly about varieties, and who happened to have an early example of the 1995 sitting in a 2x2 cardboard holder in a box in their study, and when the variety was first publicly documented and described in numismatic journals, this collector pulled out their example, examined it, and realized with growing disbelief that they had been storing one of the finest known specimens in a cardboard holder in a cardboard box for the better part of a decade, and the eventual auction of that coin produced a result that fundamentally transformed their family's financial reality in the most dramatic and wonderful way imaginable. Oh my goodness, can you feel the excitement of that moment? Can you feel what it would be like to go from thinking you have a nice little 10-cent coin to realizing you have one of the most sought-after numismatic objects in the world? That is the magic, that is the absolute heart-stopping magic of this hobby, and it is available to you, right now, with the coins that might be sitting in your own home. If you've been watching this entire video, you have just received an education in Roosevelt Dime varieties that most collectors spend years acquiring, and you now have the foundational knowledge to go through your own coins with informed, purposeful eyes, and that knowledge is a gift that nobody can ever take away from you. The identification of a potentially valuable 1995 Roosevelt Dime begins with the D-Mint mark verification and continues with a systematic examination of every raised element of the obverse design for the doubling characteristics that define the variety, and the most important thing to remember is that genuine double die doubling is mechanical and consistent. The same offset appears in the same direction across multiple design elements, giving the coin a visually cohesive and distinctive appearance that distinguishes it from the common die deterioration or die erosion that can create superficially similar but less valuable effects on other coins, and developing the eye to see that difference is one of the most valuable skills a coin hunter can possess. The market for the 1995 Roosevelt Dime in the highest grades has attracted attention not just from traditional numismatic collectors but from investment advisors, family office managers, and alternative asset specialists who have recognized that certified rare coins at the top of the registry have demonstrated price appreciation that rivals and in some cases exceeds the performance of equities, real estate, and precious metals over comparable time periods, and that broader investment interest has been one of the driving forces behind the auction results that continue to redefine what is possible in this market. The Denver Mint of 1995 was producing these dimes as a purely functional exercise in national commerce, and the workers and engineers at that facility would be astonished to learn that a fraction of what they created that year would someday be worth more than most of them could earn in multiple lifetimes. And that disconnect between intended function and ultimate value is one of the most philosophically fascinating aspects of numismatics, the idea that the very act of creating something ordinary in extraordinary quantities almost guarantees that extraordinary things will emerge from the process, hidden in the millions, waiting for the person with the knowledge and the curiosity to find them. And here we are, at the end of an incredible journey through some of the most remarkable Roosevelt dimes ever documented, and I want you to leave this video with 3 things firmly in your mind. First, go check every Roosevelt dime you have access to, in change jars, in old collections, in inherited boxes of coins, and look at them with the educated eyes you have developed today. Second, subscribe to the Coin Merchant right now because we are going to keep bringing you exactly this kind of transformative numismatic knowledge every single week, with new coins, new stories, new discoveries, and new opportunities for you to find your own fortune hiding in plain sight. And third, like this video and share it with everyone in your life who handles money, which is to say share it with everyone, because the next person to find a life-changing coin in their pocket change might be your spouse, your parent, your friend, your neighbor, but only if they have the knowledge to recognize what they're holding, and by sharing this video you are giving them that gift. Drop a comment below and tell us about the most interesting coin you've ever found, because your story might inspire the next great discovery, and that is what this community is all about, people helping people find the extraordinary in the ordinary, the priceless in the everyday, the fortune hiding in plain sight all around us every single day. Thank you for watching the Coin Merchant. Don't spend those dimes, and we will see you in the next video.